Welcome to Dark Reddit, your late-night escape into eerie calm. I'm Alex, your voice in the dark and your guide through the unknown. This is Podcast 10, a shadowy chapter in our ever-growing collection of sleepless nights. Tonight's journey spans 1 hour and 4 minutes. A series of chilling tales, whispered into your ears, softly, slowly, designed to help your mind drift while the darkness unfolds around you. Before we begin, find a quiet, comfortable place to rest. Dim the lights, silence your world, and take one slow, steady breath. Now, close your eyes. Every story in tonight's episode is new, uncharted, untold, and unearthed from the darker corners of Reddit. Tales of strangers, shadows, and things that don't always stay in the past. Let your body grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift. You don't need to watch. You only need to listen. You're safe here. Now, let the night begin. This story is about a father and his son's strange experience near a cemetery. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of day where the sun filtered through the trees just enough to cast that warm glow across the road. I remember that the air smelled faintly of cut grass and springtime, and I was humming along to the radio as I drove. My son, Miles, was in the back seat, strapped into his car seat, singing his own little version of a song he'd clearly heard one too many times on one of those toddler shows. He was 3 years old at the time, talkative, bright-eyed, always narrating his world as it unfolded around him. We were heading home from grabbing a late lunch, just the two of us. We weren't in a hurry, just meandering our way through one of the quieter parts of town. As we passed a small, modest cemetery tucked off the road, I didn't think anything of it. It was one of those places you barely notice unless you're looking for it. Rows of flat plaques and fresh flowers, no towering gravestones or mausoleums. From the road, it almost looked like a public garden. Then Miles went quiet. The silence hit me first. That kind of quiet that feels intentional, not sleepy or distracted, but focused. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him craning his little neck, eyes locked on the cemetery we were passing. Then he pointed, just a small, pudgy finger lifted toward the window, and said, "Look at all those people." I furrowed my brow, instinctively glancing toward the cemetery. There was no one there, just sunlight catching on flower petals, a little breeze rustling the trees. Empty. What people? I asked, already uneasy. "All those people over there," Miles said. His voice was so matter-of-fact, like he was pointing out birds or a dog at the park. "There sure are a lot of grandmas." I laughed at first, nervous laughter. My hands gripped the wheel a little tighter. "What are they doing?" I asked, half joking, though I already had that pit-of-your-stomach feeling. "They're all standing there," he said, looking down at the grass. I didn't say anything after that. I just kept driving. Picked up speed, actually. I glanced in the mirror again. Miles had already turned his head, now distracted by something out the opposite window like nothing had happened. Me? My chest was tight, like something heavy was pressing against it. I didn't want to admit it, but I had goosebumps running up both arms. There's a moment as a parent when something your child says goes beyond imagination, past creepy kid moment, and straight into the uncanny. I don't know how to describe it, other than to say you just know when it's not play. Back at home, things felt normal again. Miles watched cartoons from his usual spot on the couch, cuddled up in his favorite blanket, his snack cup in one hand. I had just started to settle into the quiet, to chalk it all up to a weird coincidence or maybe some show he had seen that had cemeteries in it. That's when he said it. "You know," he said casually, not taking his eyes off the TV. "They weren't alive." "What?" I asked, my body stiffening. "Those people," he clarified, still watching the screen. "The ones we saw in the garden place. They were all paused. I just stood there. The TV was on low, and Miles sat perfectly still, unfazed. My mind spun. "What do you mean, paused?" He shrugged the way toddlers do when they don't have better words. Like frozen, not moving, like statues, but not statues. It wasn't the way he said it. It was the calm behind it. The same tone he used when telling me he saw a red car or that he wanted juice. Just a simple observation. I didn't press him after that. I didn't want to scare him or myself. Later that night, after I'd put him to bed, I sat alone in the living room and played the whole thing back in my head again. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he saw a show with ghosts or statues in a park, or maybe his little mind had just cooked up something wild in that split second. Kids see things, right? But he didn't sound like he was making it up. And he'd never said anything like that before. The way he described it, the people, the grandmas, the standing and staring down at the grass, it wasn't the kind of detail he would have pulled from a cartoon. And why paused? That word haunted me. I went to bed that night with a strange sense of unease. Not terror exactly, but a quiet kind of dread. Like I had brushed up against something just outside the reach of explanation. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I even Googled the cemetery, trying to find out if there was some kind of memorial service that day we'd missed seeing. Nothing came up. Eventually, I shared the story on a podcast I sometimes listen to, Monsters Among Us, just to get it out there. I half expected people to laugh or dismiss it, but the opposite happened. People reached out with stories of their own, children seeing things, conversations about the paused. And now, years later, I still don't know what to make of it. Was it a glimpse into another world? Another layer we adults have long since tuned out? Was it grief made visible to a child's eyes? Or was it simply an imagination too vivid for its own good? I don't have an answer, but I know what I heard. I know how Miles looked when he said it. I know how the air felt when he pointed, and I haven't driven past that cemetery since. This story is about a man who captured something chilling during a weekend stay at a famously haunted hotel. In April 2016, Henry Yao, a public relations professional from Texas, needed a break. Craving a quick escape from the grind of everyday life, he settled on the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. Nestled in the Rocky Mountains and steeped in legend, the hotel wasn't just a picturesque retreat. It was a place notorious for ghost stories. And it was famously the inspiration behind Stephen King's iconic horror novel, The Shining. Henry wasn't particularly superstitious. He'd heard of the hotel's haunted reputation. Sure, but like many others, he figured it added a certain charm to the place. At most, he hoped for a few spooky thrills, maybe a creaky floorboard or unexplained draft. The idea of ghosts was more of a story to him, not something he'd ever expected to brush up against. He arrived on a chilly afternoon, the hotel looming before him like a grand, frozen-in-time relic. With its white facade and red roof, the Stanley looked both inviting and imposing. Henry checked in, had dinner in the hotel restaurant, and decided to explore a bit. Armed with his phone, he began snapping pictures, enjoying the quiet majesty of the century-old building. One location in particular caught his attention: the grand staircase. It was the kind of place that seemed to breathe history. Henry waited patiently for the area to clear. He wanted a clean shot of the stairs, free of any people. Once it was empty, he lifted his phone, took the photo, and moved on. That night, everything changed. Back in his room, Henry began to feel unwell. He described it later as a sudden, overwhelming sickness, chills, nausea, a sense that something was deeply wrong. His traveling companion urged him to go to the emergency room, but Henry, unsure of what exactly was happening to him, decided to wait it out. The next morning, groggy and still a bit shaken, Henry scrolled through the photos he'd taken during his self-guided tour. Most were just what you'd expect: ornate halls, antique furniture, wide windows casting golden sunlight across faded carpets. But then he saw it. In the photo of the staircase, where he was certain no one had been standing, there appeared a figure. Not blurry or vague like most alleged ghost photos, this one was sharp. It looked like a woman dressed in old-fashioned clothing, standing on the steps as if she belonged there. Her form was slightly translucent, her dress flowing, her presence unmistakable. Henry was stunned. He examined the photo over and over again. No one had walked by. He had waited. He had looked. That staircase was empty when he took the shot. He posted the image on Instagram with a tongue-in-cheek caption suggesting he might have caught a ghost. He expected a few likes, maybe a comment or two from friends. Instead, the photo exploded. News outlets picked it up. Paranormal investigators reached out. People debated fiercely. Was it real? A trick of the light? A long exposure? Photoshop? Henry insisted the image was untouched. Some experts say there's actually 2 ghosts in the photo, he shared in an interview. Others offered a different theory, that the overwhelming sickness he experienced that night was connected. They say the spirit was trying to manifest and pulled energy from me, Henry explained. That's why I felt so drained. There were skeptics, of course. There always are. But what struck people most was Henry's sincerity. He wasn't a ghost hunter. He wasn't trying to go viral. He just wanted a relaxing weekend in the mountains and ended up with one of the most talked about paranormal photos in recent history. As for what he believes now, I don't know, he says with a laugh. I can't explain it, but I know no one was on those stairs when I took that photo. The Stanley Hotel has embraced its haunted fame since the publication of The Shining. It offers ghost tours, and guests regularly share their own eerie experiences. Flickering lights, mysterious footsteps, pianos playing by themselves. It's all part of the hotel's mystique. But even among the many stories, Henry Yao's encounter stands out. Because it's not just about what he saw, it's about what he felt. That sudden illness, the photo, the media storm, it was an experience that left him forever changed. Whether it was a coincidence, a camera glitch, or something truly supernatural, Henry will never forget that weekend in Colorado. Not just because he took a once-in-a-lifetime photo, but because for a brief moment, he stepped into a mystery bigger than himself and came away with proof, or at least the possibility, that we don't know everything about the world around us. He laughs now when people still ask him about the ghost. Honestly, I just wanted a quiet weekend. Instead, I got a story I'll be telling for the rest of my life. This story is about the spine-chilling legacy of one of America's most haunted houses. Nestled in Old Town San Diego, the Whaley House stands as a grand and timeless piece of history. But beneath its warm red brick facade and historical charm lies something far more unnerving. Built in 1856 by Thomas Whaley, a successful businessman from New York, the house was intended to be a symbol of prosperity. Instead, it became a vessel for ghost stories, whispers in the night, and strange happenings that continue to mystify visitors and staff to this day. Victor Santana, the operations manager of the Whaley House Museum, has heard it all. From disembodied voices and heavy footsteps to sudden wafts of perfume, and the chilling cries of a woman in the dead of night, Santana has spent years navigating the house's haunted reputation. The land on which the Whaley House stands has a grim past. Before the home was constructed, it served as the site of San Diego's public gallows, a place where criminals met their end beneath a hangman's noose. One of the most infamous was Yankee Jim Robinson, executed for stealing a boat. According to legend, Thomas Whaley himself witnessed Robinson's hanging. Whether from guilt, fate, or bad luck, the energy of that event seems to have lingered. Whaley would later report hearing heavy bootsteps on the stairs and unexplained male grunts echoing through his office. He believed it was the spirit of Yankee Jim, pacing through the home in eternal unrest. But Yankee Jim isn't the only ghost rumored to haunt the property. After Thomas Whaley passed away, he too is said to have joined the ranks of spectral residents. Visitors claim to have seen a man at the top of the staircase, peering down with an unreadable expression. Others have noted the unmistakable scent of cigars, Thomas's favorite, wafting through rooms where no smoke should be. Then there are the more delicate hauntings, the floral scent of lavender, thought to be from Anna Whaley, Thomas's wife, whose presence is said to linger in the parlor. Guests report sudden chills, gentle touches on their arms, and even soft, feminine sobbing heard late at night. And it doesn't stop there. The Whaley family's beloved pets also appear to have stayed behind. Santana recounts visitors describing the feeling of a small dog brushing past their legs, or the sensation of being licked by an unseen animal. Though Santana himself has never seen a ghost with his own eyes, he doesn't dismiss the experiences of others. He once watched a doll seemingly move on its own and has heard unexplained crying echo through the empty house when no one else was around. The most convincing evidence, he says, came during a late-night paranormal investigation. Using an EVP recorder, the team asked the usual round of questions. Is anyone here with us? Do you want to talk to us? Then came the question, are you happy we are here with you tonight? When they played the recording back, a voice, clear, deliberate, and unmistakably not one of the living, responded, no. Chills ran through the room. Santana remembers how everyone fell silent. The Whaley House doesn't rely on jump scares or over-the-top theatrics to send a shiver down your spine. The fear it evokes is more profound, a quiet tension that hangs in the air, a sense that you're never really alone. And for some, like Santana, it's this subtle, lingering eeriness that makes the Whaley House so compelling. Tourists still flock to the site, drawn by its haunted reputation and curious to experience the paranormal for themselves. Some leave laughing, others leave rattled. But almost everyone leaves changed, carrying with them a story they can't quite explain. Perhaps that's the true power of the Whaley House. It reminds us that history isn't just something we read about. Sometimes it lingers, sometimes it watches, and sometimes it speaks. As Santana often says with a knowing smile, "You don't have to believe in ghosts to feel something here. Just come spend the night. See for yourself." This story is about the spine-chilling legacy of one of America's most haunted houses. Nestled in Old Town San Diego, the Whaley House stands as a grand and timeless piece of history. But beneath its warm red brick facade and historical charm lies something far more unnerving. Built in 1856 by Thomas Whaley, a successful businessman from New York, the house was intended to be a symbol of prosperity. Instead, it became a vessel for ghost stories, whispers in the night, and strange happenings that continue to mystify visitors and staff to this day. Victor Santana, the operations manager of the Whaley House Museum, has heard it all. From disembodied voices and heavy footsteps to sudden wafts of perfume, and the chilling cries of a woman in the dead of night, Santana has spent years navigating the house's haunted reputation. The land on which the Whaley House stands has a grim past. Before the home was constructed, it served as the site of San Diego's public gallows, a place where criminals met their end beneath a hangman's noose. One of the most infamous was Yankee Jim Robinson, executed for stealing a boat. According to legend, Thomas Whaley himself witnessed Robinson's hanging. Whether from guilt, fate, or bad luck, the energy of that event seems to have lingered. Whaley would later report hearing heavy bootsteps on the stairs and unexplained male grunts echoing through his office. He believed it was the spirit of Yankee Jim, pacing through the home in eternal unrest. But Yankee Jim isn't the only ghost rumored to haunt the property. After Thomas Whaley passed away, he too is said to have joined the ranks of spectral residents. Visitors claim to have seen a man at the top of the staircase, peering down with an unreadable expression. Others have noted the unmistakable scent of cigars, Thomas's favorite, wafting through rooms where no smoke should be. Then there are the more delicate hauntings, the floral scent of lavender, thought to be from Anna Whaley, Thomas's wife, whose presence is said to linger in the parlor. Guests report sudden chills, gentle touches on their arms, and even soft, feminine sobbing heard late at night. And it doesn't stop there. The Whaley family's beloved pets also appear to have stayed behind. Santana recounts visitors describing the feeling of a small dog brushing past their legs, or the sensation of being licked by an unseen animal. Though Santana himself has never seen a ghost with his own eyes, he doesn't dismiss the experiences of others. He once watched a doll seemingly move on its own and has heard unexplained crying echo through the empty house when no one else was around. The most convincing evidence, he says, came during a late-night paranormal investigation. Using an EVP recorder, the team asked the usual round of questions. Is anyone here with us? Do you want to talk to us? Then came the question, are you happy we are here with you tonight? When they played the recording back, a voice, clear, deliberate, and unmistakably not one of the living, responded, "No." Chills ran through the room. Santana remembers how everyone fell silent. The Whaley house doesn't rely on jump scares or over-the-top theatrics to send a shiver down your spine. The fear it evokes is more profound. A quiet tension that hangs in the air. A sense that you're never really alone. And for some, like Santana, it's this subtle, lingering eeriness that makes the Whaley house so compelling. Tourists still flock to the site, drawn by its haunted reputation and curious to experience the paranormal for themselves. Some leave laughing, others leave rattled. But almost everyone leaves changed, carrying with them a story they can't quite explain. Perhaps that's the true power of the Whaley house. It reminds us that history isn't just something we read about. Sometimes it lingers, sometimes it watches, and sometimes it speaks. As Santana often says with a knowing smile, "You don't have to believe in ghosts to feel something here. Just come spend the night. See for yourself." This story is about the lingering presence in a house tied to one of America's most infamous murder cases. On a hot summer day, August 4th, 1892, Fall River, Massachusetts was rocked by a gruesome crime. Andrew and Abby Borden were found murdered in their home, each bludgeoned repeatedly with a hatchet in a scene of unimaginable brutality. The crime was sensational, but what made it historic was the prime suspect, their 32-year-old daughter, Lizzie Borden. Lizzie was eventually acquitted of the murders, but the questions surrounding her innocence or guilt have never gone away. Neither, it seems, have the victims. Today, the house where Andrew and Abby lost their lives is no ordinary home. It's now a bed and breakfast and museum where visitors can stay overnight in the very rooms where the murders took place. But it's not just history buffs and true crime fans who make the pilgrimage. Paranormal enthusiasts also flock to the house, drawn by rumors that something, or someone, is still there. One of those people is Suzanne St. John. A realtor by trade and a tour guide by passion, Suzanne started working at the Lizzie Borden house for the history. She never expected the house to start reaching back. "When I started here, I didn't believe in any of it," she admits. "I liked the story, the mystery, the courtroom drama, but the paranormal? That wasn't my thing." But that changed. Guests often report hearing laughter and footsteps in the middle of the night. Others say their belongings move or vanish. Some even claim to feel sudden cold spots, as if someone invisible just brushed by. Suzanne had heard all the stories, but it wasn't until she experienced it herself that her skepticism began to falter. One day, she entered a room that hadn't been used only to find toys, antique-looking and out of place, scattered across the floor. It looked like kids had been playing, she says, but nobody had been in there. Then there was the picture. She had just straightened the room when she turned around to find a framed photograph face down on the floor. It hadn't fallen with a thud. It had landed softly and then, inexplicably, slid 2 feet across the wooden floor. There was no slope, no vibration. It just moved, she insists. Another time, a closet door creaked open as she passed by on its own. I stopped dead in my tracks. I even tried to recreate it later, thinking maybe it was a draft or pressure difference. But no, nothing explained it. The most unnerving experience of all happened the night before the anniversary of the murders. Suzanne and two other guides were standing in the parlor where Andrew Borden had been murdered when all three of them suddenly felt a stabbing pain, sharp and unexpected, in their left eyes. That, chillingly, was where Andrew had sustained a fatal wound. None of them spoke right away, too stunned by what they felt. But when one finally did, the others nodded with wide eyes. They'd all felt it, the exact same pain, in the exact same place. There's a weight to the Lizzie Borden house, an energy. Suzanne says it's hard to explain unless you've been there. One moment especially haunts her. A fellow tour guide was beginning an evening session and, as usual, asked guests to silence their cell phones. A moment later, a woman's phone rang. Embarrassed, the guest glanced at her screen and froze. "It's my mom," she said softly. The tour guide blinked. "Do you want to step out and take it?" The woman's eyes welled with tears. "She died 2 years ago. No one said a word. Was it a glitch? A saved contact with a reassigned number? Or was it something more?" Stories like these pile up at the Lizzie Borden house. There's the smell of lavender, often associated with Lizzie's stepmother, Abby. Cold spots in the hallway. The sound of shuffling footsteps when the house is empty. Some visitors report seeing a woman in period dress staring from a window. Others feel a presence watching them as they sleep. And still, not everyone believes. Suzanne doesn't try to convince skeptics anymore. "You don't have to believe it," she says. "You just have to experience it." For those brave enough to spend the night, the Borden house offers a rare kind of thrill. You sleep in rooms where history refused to die, where echoes from the past might still walk the halls. It's not just a murder scene. It's not just a museum. It's a question mark with doors that still creak open on their own. And if you listen closely, maybe, just maybe, you'll hear the past whisper back. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is certain. Once you step into the Lizzie Borden house, you leave with a story, maybe even one that keeps you up at night. This story is about a father and his son who stopped to admire a passing train, only to find they weren't alone. In the quaint New England town of Ashland, Massachusetts, where history hums beneath every cobblestone and whistle of the passing train, there's a place where the past refuses to stay in the past. Stone's Public House, a beautiful yet brooding building that dates back to 1832, stands like a monument to another time, a time that, according to many, never really left. Locals call it one of the most haunted spots in the country, and those who've walked its creaky floors or sat alone at the bar too late into the night will tell you, it's not the kind of place you forget. Janet Morazzini has worked at Stone's for years, tending the bar and managing the inn's steady flow of curious patrons, longtime regulars, and the occasional paranormal investigator. But her relationship with the place started long before she ever poured her first pint. "I'd heard stories about the little boy in the hallway," she says, her voice steady but reflective. "Even before I worked here, people talked about the ghosts at Stone's. That little boy is said to roam the second floor, sometimes seen out of the corner of a guest's eye, sometimes heard running down the halls when no one else is upstairs. And it's not hard to imagine why spirits might linger here. During the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, the upstairs rooms were used as makeshift quarantine wards. They turned this place into a kind of ad hoc hospital," Janet explains. That's where they would keep all the sick people, and a lot of them didn't make it. The building itself, built by John Stone, businessman, politician, and the inn's original proprietor, has seen more than its fair share of tragedy. One of the more heartbreaking tales is that of a young girl who lived near the tracks that run alongside the property. She used to play there often, always just a little too close to the trains. One day, she wasn't quick enough. She was struck and killed, Janet says quietly, right there by the tracks. Years later, her presence is still felt. Janet remembers one particular evening with vivid clarity. A father and his young son had come in for an early dinner. The boy was quiet, wide-eyed, the way kids sometimes are when they feel something adults can't. After their meal, the pair stepped outside to watch a train roll by. When they came back in, Janet couldn't help but overhear the father trying to soothe his visibly shaken child. He was saying, "There was nobody there, it was just me and you, buddy," she recalls. But the boy kept insisting. He'd seen a little girl sitting right next to him on the bench, said she was crying. The father looked pale, confused. Janet didn't intervene, but the moment lingered with her. It still does. You get used to the stories here, but that one stuck with me, she admits. But not all the spirits at Stone's are sad or lost. Some, it seems, are just keeping watch. Janet says John Stone himself still has a presence in the building, even though he didn't die there. He built the place, you know? Maybe he just wants to keep an eye on it. One night, long after closing, Janet was alone, doing some paperwork behind the bar. The inn was quiet. She knew no one else was in the building. But then footsteps, clear as day, directly above her on the second floor. She paused, listened. The steps were deliberate, heavy. I was just like, yeah, there is no explanation for that whatsoever, she says with a nervous laugh. I grabbed my stuff and I left, just like that. Still, she says she's never felt anything malicious at Stone's. Unsettling, sure. Unexplained, often. But evil? No, never like that. I've never had that scary hair on the back of your neck, I gotta get out of this building now kind of feeling, she says. Many others agree. Guests report flickering lights, cold spots, the sound of distant children playing when no one is around. One couple claimed their wine glasses slid 3 inches across the table, without spilling a drop. Another said they felt a tug on their coat as they left the restroom, but turned to find no one there. The stories vary, but the theme is always the same. Something lingers. Janet has come to accept the spirits as part of the job, like stubborn regulars who refuse to leave their favorite barstool. She even finds a sort of comfort in it. There's a lot of history here, a lot of life and a lot of death, she says, but nothing that's ever made me feel unsafe. It's just part of the house. Still, every time the sun sets and the last patron walks out the door, Janet takes a deep breath before locking up. She's learned not to linger too long upstairs, and when she hears a sound that shouldn't be there, she doesn't question it anymore. She just whispers a polite good night and lets the ghosts get on with their evening. Because in a place like Stone's, the past isn't dead. It's just on the other side of the bar. This story is about a little girl whose imaginary friend wasn't imaginary at all. Jacqueline, born in 1982, grew up with fond memories of visiting her grandparents' home in Oklahoma. Nestled on a quiet street with a modest backyard shaded by a sprawling tree, the house held a simple, comforting charm. Her grandmother, lovingly called Granny Junie, was a kind and reserved woman, while her grandfather, Pa Hank, was a man Jacqueline described as colorful, animated, and full of stories. She remembers vividly sitting outside under the big tree, with Pa Hank beside her, spinning stories about the old days, bootlegging, prohibition, and all sorts of adventures from another era. He had a warm voice and a certain twinkle in his eye that made his tales come alive. He was actually a very interesting character, Jacqueline said on the podcast Monsters Among Us. I have very good memories of my Pa Hank. He would sit under the tree with me and tell me stories. There was just one problem. Pa Hank had passed away in 1981. Jacqueline wasn't born until the following year. For most of her childhood, she never questioned the experiences she had. She assumed, like many children do, that her imaginary friend was just that, imaginary. But as she grew older and her family began sharing stories and connecting dots, Jacqueline started to realize that her experiences with Pa Hank might not have been so innocent or ordinary after all. She recalls, with eerie clarity, waking up in the middle of the night during sleepovers at her grandmother's house and hearing footsteps down the hall or the creaking of a rocking chair in the living room. She never felt scared, felt normal, like a grandparent checking in to make sure she was tucked in. Even more striking, Jacqueline would describe conversations with her imaginary friend that included details about her grandfather's life. Details she should not have known at such a young age. Tales of moonshine hidden in the barn, of shotgun weddings and poker games at the VFW hall. Stories her grandmother would later confirm were true, down to the smallest detail. It was her grandmother who finally gave voice to the unspoken truth. "You know he died in this house," she told Jacqueline one evening, "and I never stay here on the anniversary of his passing." That was the moment the puzzle pieces began to align. Her grandfather had passed in that very home, and what Jacqueline thought were innocent visits from a figment of her imagination may have been something much more. Her family, it turned out, had long believed the house held onto some trace of him. Granny Junie even claimed to have smelled his aftershave lingering in the hallway or heard the floorboards creak as if he were pacing late at night, just like he used to do when he couldn't sleep. "It never occurred to me that these were memories of an entity," Jacqueline admitted. "It never felt like ghosts. It felt like talking to my Pa Hank." Unlike many ghost stories filled with dread or terror, Jacqueline's memories hold a gentle quality, something more like a family reunion than a haunting. There was comfort in those encounters, not fear. Her ghost was family. Her ghost was love lingering. Of course, not everyone would believe her story. Skeptics might chalk it up to an active imagination or childhood confusion. But Jacqueline knows what she experienced. Those talks under the tree, the creaking floorboards, the bedtime whispers, they weren't dreams or inventions. They were visits. They were real. Now, as an adult, Jacqueline looks back on those years not with fear, but with a kind of reverent gratitude. The idea that her grandfather chose to stay close, to watch over her and keep her company when she was young, gives her a sense of peace. "I don't think I ever realized I was getting stories from a ghost," she said, "but now she knows better. And even though the house is no longer in the family and her grandparents have long passed, she sometimes finds herself under a tree in her own backyard, telling stories to her kids, just the way Pa Hank did. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the leaves just right, Jacqueline swears she hears the faint sound of his voice, chuckling softly just beyond the breeze. This story is about a man who helped his brother move into a new home and quickly realized something was terribly wrong. When Joe moved from California to Georgia in the late 1990s, he didn't expect much to change. He was looking for a fresh start, a quiet life in the South away from the hustle and bustle of the West Coast. But little did he know, his new chapter would be filled with far more than just new scenery. Not long after settling into his new life, Joe's brother decided to follow him. He rented a charming old house, built in the 1800s, and Joe helped him move in. On the surface, the house was everything they could have hoped for: spacious, peaceful, and tucked away under old oak trees. But from the moment Joe stepped inside, something felt off. It looked nice from the outside, Joe says, but it did not feel good from the inside. The second he crossed the threshold, an overwhelming unease settled over him. His skin prickled, and a knot twisted in his stomach. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, he recalls. I felt like this place isn't cool at all. Joe tried to brush off the feeling. After all, he was there to help his brother, and there was no turning back now. But as he carried boxes into the back bedroom, it became clear that this wasn't just a case of nerves. He froze. From above, he could hear voices, low, hushed voices, whispering. The sound wasn't coming from anyone in the room with him. It wasn't the wind. It was like there were two people arguing, hovering near the ceiling, their words clipped and sharp. Joe quickly dropped the box and bolted out of the room. I asked my brother, "Do you feel something weird about this place?" He recalls, his voice tight. His brother admitted that the house did give him a strange vibe, but shrugged it off. "As long as you're good," Joe told him. "I'm not, but I'll help you move in. But I'm not coming back here. I'm telling you that right now." And sure enough, Joe never did. But his brother stayed, and soon things started to escalate. It started with small, subtle things. Objects moved. Shadows seemed to linger in corners. And then the little things, like the creaking of floorboards late at night when no one else was up. But it wasn't until Joe's niece, his brother's young daughter, wandered out of the house that things took a darker turn. One afternoon, the little girl was found walking alone on a busy road. It was a miracle that no one had hit her, but no one could figure out how she had gotten outside, let alone onto the road. The front door was heavy, far too difficult for a 4-year-old to open on her own. But when the child was asked what had happened, she explained it matter-of-factly. "The old lady who lives here. She opened the door. Then we petted the dog, and we went for a walk." Joe's brother was floored. He knew there was no old lady living there. So who or what had his niece been speaking to? The little girl was so honest, so genuine in her explanation, that Joe's brother couldn't dismiss it as imagination. Something was happening in that house. Something old. That was the last straw. Soon after, his brother moved his family out, and the house was abandoned. Even now, Joe can't shake the feeling that something still lingers there, waiting, watching. "I never went back," Joe says. "Not once, and I never will." Our next story comes from someone who didn't believe in the paranormal until one night at their grandparents' house. I've always considered myself a rational person. I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything supernatural. But there's one thing I've never been able to explain, and it happened in my grandparents' house. A place notorious for its hauntings, even included in a haunted houses tour in the Los Angeles area. People swore it was cursed, full of restless souls, but I always shrugged it off, assuming it was just the stuff of local legends. I was about 6 years old when it happened, and at that time I didn't really have much reason to fear. My sister, who was 12, and I shared a room at my grandparents' house. It wasn't a huge room, but there was something comforting about it, like an old, familiar embrace. My mom had decorated our bedside table with an antique telephone. It wasn't plugged in, didn't work at all, and was nothing more than a decorative piece that my mom loved. A nod to a simpler time. That night, everything seemed normal at first. My sister and I were asleep, wrapped in our own little worlds. But then, for some reason, we both woke up at exactly the same time. It wasn't the kind of waking up you get from a loud noise or an uncomfortable position. No, it was different. We both just opened our eyes, almost as if we were meant to wake up together. We turned to face each other in the dark, but there was something in the air that instantly made me feel uneasy. It wasn't just the usual stirrings of waking up in the night. It was dread, pure and palpable, like a weight pressing down on my chest. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence thick and suffocating. And then it happened. The phone rang. The sound pierced the night, sharp and sudden, and I felt my heart race. It wasn't a normal phone ring, though. It was hollow, distant, as if the sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The antique phone sitting on the bedside table, the one that wasn't plugged in, was ringing. I remember the chill that washed over me. My sister's face mirrored the panic I was feeling. Without saying a word, we both immediately dove under our blankets, hoping that if we just hid long enough, it would go away. The phone continued to ring, but it didn't sound like any phone I'd ever heard before. The noise was grating, unsettling, like it didn't belong. We waited in the dark, holding our breath, frozen under the covers until the ringing finally stopped. Silence filled the room once again, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of the night. It was heavy, tense, like something had just passed through the room but left an impression we couldn't quite shake. The next morning, I didn't say anything about it to my sister. I convinced myself that I had imagined it, that maybe I had dreamed the whole thing. After all, it was a weird dream, right? That's what I told myself. But then, a few years later, my sister and I were talking about old memories, as siblings often do. Somehow, we got to talking about strange things that had happened in that room, and she mentioned the ringing phone. My heart skipped a beat. "You remember the phone ringing that night?" she asked, almost as if it was an afterthought. I froze. My mind raced. I hadn't mentioned it to her at all, not once in all the years that had passed. But she remembered it, too. We both had the exact same experience. The same phone ringing in the middle of the night. The same feeling of dread that overtook us. The same terrified silence as we hid under the blankets. We hadn't spoken about it before, yet here we were, confirming each other's memories as if the event had been imprinted in our minds, undeniable and shared. We both knew that we hadn't imagined it. Something happened that night, something that neither of us could explain. And even though we never talked about it again after that, I could still hear the faint ring of the phone in my mind whenever I thought back to that night. There are many more stories from my grandparents' house, too many to recount here. The place was full of strange occurrences. Doors that would creak open by themselves, shadows that moved just out of sight, cold drafts that seemed to appear out of nowhere. But that one, the ringing phone, was the one I couldn't shake. The one that stuck with me even though I didn't believe in the paranormal. As an adult, I still don't know what to believe. I don't think of myself as someone who's particularly open to supernatural explanations, but there are moments when I remember the phone ringing, and I wonder if that house really was haunted. Maybe there's more to this world than we can understand, or maybe some things just can't be explained. But whatever it was that night, the feeling of dread, the sound of that unearthly ring, will stay with me forever. And every time I pass an old antique telephone, I can't help but think about it, wondering if I'll ever find the answers to the strange events that unfolded in that house so many years ago. This next story starts with a simple knock and ends with something that couldn't be explained. It was just a normal evening a couple of years ago. The kind of quiet, forgettable day where nothing particularly strange happens, until it does. I was at home watching a movie with a friend. It was early evening, maybe an hour before sunset, and the light outside had that soft, golden calm. We were a few scenes into the movie when I got up to use the bathroom. As I stepped back into the living room, just a few feet from the front door, I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Not gentle, but not aggressive either. Like someone who wanted to be heard, but wasn't trying to scare anyone. A no-nonsense kind of knock. I was already up, only 3 steps from the door, so I casually opened it. There was no one there, just the front yard bathed in soft light, the sky fading into evening. No cars on the street, no footsteps in the gravel, just peace. I leaned out, looked around a bit, expecting to see someone walking away, maybe a delivery guy getting back into a van, or even a kid pulling a prank. But there was nothing, not a sound, no movement. I shrugged it off and went back inside. 15 minutes passed. We were getting back into the rhythm of the movie when it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Same weight, same rhythm, just as clear as before. This time, I was already sitting close to the door. Annoyed now, I jumped up and opened it quickly, hoping to catch whoever was playing games. Again, no one. The porch was empty, street still quiet. I live on a corner lot, so it's pretty exposed. There aren't many places to hide, and the layout makes it hard to sneak around without being seen or heard. Still, I did a quick loop around the house just to be sure. Nothing. No shadows darting behind bushes. No figures slipping around fences. It was like the knock had come from nowhere. Now I was unsettled. I didn't immediately jump to the supernatural. I'm not that kind of person. I figured maybe it was a prank, some neighborhood kid messing around, but it didn't feel like that. Something about it was just off. I went back inside, more irritated than scared, but I had this nagging feeling in my gut, like the calm of the evening had cracked slightly, and something was leaking in through the seams. so I grabbed a chair from the dining room and set it beside the front door. Just sat there, hand on the doorknob, eyes flicking toward the window every few minutes. I was ready. I told my friend, half jokingly, if it happens again, I'm gonna catch whoever it is. We waited. The movie played on, but I barely watched it. Every creak in the house felt louder. The air in the room felt denser, like something was building. Then it came again. Bam, bam, bam. This time it wasn't a knock. It was a full-on pounding. Violent, sudden. It hit the door so hard, the wood shuddered. My friend jumped in their seat. My heart felt like it dropped into my stomach. I didn't hesitate. I threw the door open immediately, expecting, wanting to see someone standing there. But there was no one. Not a shadow. Not a whisper of footsteps running away. No prankster hiding in the bushes. No delivery package. Not even a breeze to move the leaves. Just a wide, empty yard and the fading light of day slipping into twilight. And the silence, that kind of deep, unnatural silence that seems to press into your ears. The kind that makes you realize something is watching, even if you can't see it. I stepped out again, did a slower lap around the house. Nothing. The streets were still empty. Not a single person walking their dog or taking a jog. It was like the world had paused. I checked the door for marks. I had expected maybe some dirt or fingerprints from the impact, but there was nothing. No scuff marks, no dents, just the same silent wood. I stood there for a long time, longer than I probably should have. Not because I expected to catch anything, at that point I knew I wouldn't, but because I needed to feel like I was doing something. Eventually, I went back inside, sat back down in the chair by the door, hand on the knob again. But there were no more knocks, no more sounds. That was it. The knocking never came back. We finished the movie in an awkward silence. I don't even remember what it was. We weren't paying attention by then. The whole room felt different, like it had been touched by something we didn't understand. Neither of us spoke about it after. What was there to say? I lived in that house until just 2 months ago. In all the time after that night, nothing out of the ordinary ever happened again. No footsteps, no whispers, no more knocks. But I still think about it. I don't know what it was. I'm not claiming it was a ghost or something from another world, but I know it wasn't just a prank. I know what I heard. I know how fast I opened that door. I know the silence that followed and how unnatural it felt. Sometimes I think it wasn't trying to scare me, just reminding me it was there. You've made it through the hour. The stories are over now, and the night is quiet again. Let the silence soothe you. Whatever followed you from the tales, leave it here. You're safe, you're calm, and you're already drifting deeper into rest. If you enjoyed these stories, consider subscribing to Dark Reddit for more nightly chills. Until next time, sleep well.